Good times and great music at 2 URFM 103.7. I mentioned a couple of minutes back that we normally catch up with this guest on a Tuesday morning, but nevertheless, he is here today on a Friday. Our Professor of Politics out of the University of Newcastle, Dr. Jim Jose. Good morning, mate.
Yeah, good morning, Mark.
Now, we want to sort of circle back to this topic. I know we were here, I want to say a couple of months ago, but oddly enough, we actually have a bit of a voting process in a week and 1 day from here.
Yes, Mark, the referendum's pretty much upon us, Saturday week, and it's probably worth just reflecting on, both the referendum process in which a majority of voters across the nation have to say yes to approve it or no to not approve it, and then it has to be carried by a majority of states, which basically is the double step that enables any constitutional change to be slowed down a little bit and managed a little bit. What's happened, I guess, with the current referendum proposal is that it seems to be driven much more by misinformation and falsehood than it is by information. I mean, first of all, we keep getting told that there's not enough information, that there's not enough detail, yet the access to information and the detail about the proposal is readily available. And certainly the pamphlet that came around with the yes case and the no case, and regardless of the problem that much of the no case was perhaps less than factual, the yes case did set out a bunch of information that could help people. In addition, there were other websites, the Voice website, which had plenty of information if people logged onto it through their computers or online or whatever. But the continual sort of, how can I put this, statements by people who should know better, who claim that there was no information or that we're being misled about the information, seems to me to be less a case of arguing the pros and cons of the proposal and more a case of politicking for, shall we say, partisan advantage. And it's almost like a reflection of what's going on currently in the United States with the Republican Party and the Speaker of the House, that it's more important to bring the government to its knees rather than to govern. And if you're in opposition, you don't actually contribute to governing, you contribute by opposing and blocking. And it seems to me that we've picked up some of that negativity, if you like.
But hasn't there always been an element of that? I know we're straying, but there's always been a bit of an element of that, though, regardless of who is in government and who isn't. I mean, to be an effective opposition leader, in a way, you're always campaigning for the job that the other guys have. So your job is to point out the flaws or the perceived flaws in policy. Most definitely.
Pointing out the flaws in whoever in the party who happens to be in government is entirely appropriate for an opposition party that's looking to become the government. But in that process, they are also, Mark, putting themselves forward as an alternative government.
True.
As we are capable of running this country in this way because we are better in this and that and the other. And the current government is not so good because it's making these mistakes, but we know how to handle that, et cetera, et cetera. So you, in opposition, are presenting and projecting the potential to replace the incumbent government and demonstrate in the process that you're better. Now, what we have seen happen over the past couple of decades, it's been a slow, gradual unravelling, I think, is that opposing becomes more about, being in opposition becomes more about just simply blocking for the sake of it or undermining for the sake of it, rather than saying, we don't agree with this proposal, but here's what we would do, and ... whatever that might happen to be. What seems to have been happening...
To a certain extent, though, aren't they the same thing? Not always, not exclusively, but to a certain extent, aren't they similar paths?
Well, I guess it's partly a matter of definition, Mark, but it's one thing to say, I oppose this, and these are the reasons why I oppose it. It's one thing, that's one approach. The approach that seems to have been adopted, and again I take it back to the Republican Party and its particular strategies for dealing with its political opponents, that's come to Australia in different forms, is that the opposing is not about the merits or not of the particular case. It's about, well, we're going to block this regardless. We don't care what the outcome is, so long as the other side doesn't get its way. And that's not about assisting in government. I mean, the opposition in the Westminster system is still part of the governing process. It's not about making governing impossible. It's about ensuring that those who are forming a government are held to account, are having to justify what they do and how they do it. And that being an opposition, as I said, also means about projecting that we, as opposition, are an alternative government that once or if elected, we have a program of doing A, B, C, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I know we've gone off track, but I can't help circle back to this. Is it kind of almost by definition, even if that's the wrong word, but by opposing something, say, well, look, everything, even if it is everything that these guys are doing, because the other guys will look, hey, this stuff's terrible. The stuff that they're putting forward is terrible, but we've got a better way. I mean, isn't that by definition the fact that you're opposing, suggesting that even the opposite of that is inherently better?
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily in practice, but in theory. It's like if you want to do something over here, if we just say no, by doing that, by making that move in that direction, you're making the country, the council, the state, whatever, worse. Isn't that even by definition like putting an alternate point across?
Well, putting an alternate point across
which could be the status quo.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is part of being in opposition, but being in opposition is also about giving voters an alternative to look towards. And it seems to me that what has been happening now is certain comments, particularly by those who are senior figures in the opposition, making statements which are demonstrably untrue. You only have to go to the appropriate website to find the factual information that's not, in other circumstances, not contested because it's taken for granted and understood by political leaders as this is the case, etc. What's been happening, though, is that political leaders have been perhaps playing a little fast and loose with things that they don't need to. I mean, there are principled... In this referendum, there are principal positions for people to come to and take, both for and against. The principal positions, however, seem to fall far behind the positions that are being advocated by certain people, which seem to have no relationship to the facts of the matter.
Whenever you have any type of election, and particularly referendums, because it's pretty simple, you're either for something or against it. There's no grey there. Well, generally there's no grey. They can become emotional, and they become emotive because people, if the people that are engaged are passionate about something changing or something not. Seen a lot of inflammatory language and a lot of, getting down into that horrible side of things recently. I mean, if you were someone that, for example, would be wanting the yes case to get up, how damaging to have a senior figure around such as a Ray Martin calling people, if you vote no, you're a dinosaur and a dickhead, end quote. And the Prime Minister saying what a fantastic speech. I mean, isn't that the last thing he should be doing, considering he's the chief yes guy?
Well, there are lots of commentaries that one would say, gee whiz, did you really need to say it like that, etc. And, of course, in various passionate ways, some people get carried away. Some people are going to get carried away regardless. The sort of important thing, I guess, is, when we go to consider the pros and cons, we have to ask ourselves, what's important for the future of the country in the big picture. But also, in going yes or no, the issue that brought this to a head was brought out of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, in which the idea was that there needed to be constitutional recognition of First Nations peoples. that seems to be agreed across the board. The question is, how is that going to happen? And that's been clouded over, if you like, or if you want to put it another way, the waters have been entirely muddied because the idea that the Parliament is in control of this, if the referendum says yes, if the constitutional amendment goes through, it's the Parliament that then decides. And all of the parliamentary figures will have a say in what happens. The issue really, Mark, is do we want to constitutionally recognise First Nations people? And if people come to a yes view on that, then so much the better. If they come to a no view, well, that's the way the democracy works. It's not about, it's not about race. It's about recognising that the continent had prior occupation before what became then the state of Australia was federated, and the settlement of Australia by non-First Nations people is about recognising that they were in fact here first.
Super quick because we'll run out of time. This is a fairly simple one. There's no preferences. There's no things that can just tail off forever. There's really going to be three piles, isn't there? People who vote yes, people who vote no, and people that bugger it up by putting other stuff on there that aren't yes or no. We should have the results on this quicker than we usually do with elections on election night.
I would imagine so, Mark, that the outcome will be known pretty much on, well before midnight, because it's as you say, it's a simple process. It's either yes, no, or spoilt ballot paper, or invalid ballot paper, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, we should, I think, have a result. We should know on the night, pretty much.
All right, Jim, we'll know by the next time you're here, and we'll have a look at that and maybe some other stuff that are happening as well, mate. We'll let you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, you too, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Our Professor of Politics from the University of Newcastle, Dr. Jim Jose, on 2 and URFM.
A broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.